Philip Hamer continues to dominate the championship, but last time out at Mosport, David Burns was able to do the nearly unthinkable and beat the defending champion to the line. Today, however, we are in for a different race entirely as we head to Le Mans for round 4 of the Absolute Beginners League, and you'll see it all here live on the Global SimRacing Channel. Hi, I'm DJ Clark, and with me here in the booth is Asjun Pahaka. Behind the scenes is our director, Joe Peak, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Le Mans is perhaps one of the most well-known and historic circuits in the world, but let's head over to our track guide to make sure we're all up to date on it.
Welcome to Le Mans. When you talk about legendary circuits, this is a place that stands among the most famous in the world. Part permanent road course, part temporary street circuit, it traipses through the countryside just south of the city where it gets its namesake. Its size matches its reputation as well, clocking it at 8.5 miles, which equates to roughly 13.5 kilometers. However, when you take into account that it's split by only 33 turns, the frighteningly fast nature of this circuit becomes clear. Most of the corners have been added over the century of history it's experienced, but many have become renowned and respected. The two turns at the opposite ends of the massively long Mulsanne Straight play equally important roles. Tertre Rouge requires a great exit in order to not lose massive amounts of time, while Mulsanne Corner takes bravery and precision in order to brake as late as possible and keep opponents from passing you on the way in. There's also hair-raising moments like the tricky entry to Indianapolis, or the close walls along the bridge section in the Porsche curves. To win here, drivers will need a very low downforce setup, a good sense of strategy, and heaps of bravery. The 24 Hours of Le Mans is the crown jewel of endurance racing, which many drivers dream of someday winning and many fans flock to witness in person. Once you've driven the track here on iRacing, it's easy to see why.
Well, Ozzy, we're not used to seeing the little skippies take around this long Mulsanne circuit, but what do you think is going to be in store for him here today?
How many different terms, we talked about it before the broadcast, but how many different terms we can think of for draft pass? Because that's what we're going to have in store for us. A lot of drafting. The straights at Le Mans are incredibly long. Like, you can just look at the track map. It's 8.5 miles, 13.5 kilometers, and the back straight is essentially broken into 2-kilometer straights. And with the Skippy, that doesn't have that much horsepower, and it's got the Hanford device, meaning the draft lock is going to be strong with this one. So I think we are going to see some pack racing. And kind of like super speedways with NASCAR, only at half the speed. But that doesn't mean it's uninteresting. We might see some surprising storylines develop. We might see some surprising drivers make some moves for the lead. We might see some strategizing, and certainly a lot more trouble for Mr. Hammer and Mr. Burns today than it would be normally, being the fastest drivers in this series, because we might see an entirely new and surprising name take the win, and I love those. I love underdog stories, but yeah, to sum it up shortly, it's not going to be as much of a driving challenge as it is going to be a challenge about strategy.
Well, we won't have long to wait to see how that strategy will play out, but let's quickly run you through those championship standings as they sit right now. It is Philip Hamer who has locked down the championship on the year. He does have that win, and as a result, he's actually not here today, leaving David Burns alone to try to hold on to his second-place position ahead of Andre Salander. Behind him, Johan Vandenvelde is in fourth place. They're a little bit back with Jeff Randall behind him, Remco Pleisier, Neil Bamber, and Terry McGrew. They're rounding out your top 8 in a very close little battle there for that 7th place position, and even up to 6th with Josh Brain and Marcel Brunschweiler keeping things very interesting. But Ozzy, what can you tell us about the team's championship?
I can tell you what you can also see on the screen. NHR Esports leading the team championship with 82 points, 11 ahead of 2 Stupid Dogs, and then it's Evolve Motorsport in third place with 22 points behind the lead at 60. RT Racing in 4th, ABO Racing in 5th, then you got R-Racing UK Limeway with Team 1, Streetens Team 3, Streetens Team 1, and AM Racing Team rounding out the top 10 with 2 points. Totaling up their tally, so still something to underline in the team championship when it's all said and done, with 2 Stupid Dogs having a chance to catch up to NHR Esports. What's the race going to be like?
Well, the race it's going to be round 5 of the series, as we talked about, the final race in this latest season of the Absolute Beginners League. It'll be a 50-minute race out there and 2 mandatory pit stops required. And because of the length of this Le Mans circuit, I have to imagine that those are all going to be probably coming in at the same time. We're not going to see a lot of variance in fuel strategy. It is open setup. Not a whole lot of things you can do here in this Skippy, but you are able to make tunes and tweaks to whatever suits your liking. And there is one spare car, so if you get yourself into a little bit of a hairy incident, you are able to take use of that. As we turn our eyes to the track, there's about 10 minutes left to go in qualifying. Currently is Jürgen Frank sitting on the top of the charts. David Burns about 0.6 of a second behind him. Marcus Beifeld, Remco Pleisier, and Wojciech Podacek rounding out your top 5 in the standings as we watch David Third Degree Burns working his way down through the Porsche curves and seeing if he can extract anything more out of that 125 machine.
Yeah, gonna get some solvent that one. Gonna need to get something more than solvent that one if it's third degree. But yeah, David Burns coming up to the last corners. No, he's not actually taking the 4 chicanes. Instead, he is heading to the pit lane this time around. So probably gonna refuel and then go for one more try around this track. You can see the lap times in qualifying. Just under the 5-minute mark. So that means we're gonna have a roughly 10 or 11 lap race. And that's going to be roundabout the pit stops, maybe lap 3, lap 6, thereabouts. So pitting is going to be something that's all done on the same lap, but if somebody wants to go for an early stop here, maybe, that's entirely possible, pitting on lap 3 instead of 4, maybe getting their own little draft train together, 3 or 4 cars, convinced that they are faster than the leading train that is battling. That's entirely possible. But Randall now coming up to the Mulsanne corner, then 90-degree right-hander braking here nice and early. And I wonder how much race is going to be about mind slippage, DJ, because of course long straights, you're not doing that fast, you have time to think about a lot of things. So I just wonder if it's going to be also about who can keep their concentration best.
I think it very well could be, as it is going to be very tricky here. You know, you mentioned the long straights on the Mulsanne, also the run here from Mulsanne down to Indianapolis as well, an equally long straight as they go down. So it certainly could be a little bit of a play to see who can just keep their mind focused. It's going to be very, very crucial, I think, for them to be able to make sure everything is functioning the way that they really want it to be. It's going to be a tough race for these drivers, even though, yes, this is low speeds, long straights, plenty of times to think. Ozzy, as you said, you've got to really be running through those combinations and permutations of strategy, not just in terms of pitting, but where you want your car to be positioned over the course of a lap. That's going to be very, very crucial.
Indeed, and sometimes, like, you have the long straights, you can't really break out of the toe that's going to run up till like 2 seconds away in the first couple of corners, in the Dunlop curves, Dunlop SS and like that. But what you can do is potentially run away from somebody here, the Porsche curves. We are turning right, and then you have to hold it tight for the left-hander coming up. This is pretty much flat out. You can see Randall actually widening the wheel of the car, getting a bit sideways. These are always difficult corners. Once again, left, and then right, we're approaching the White House, turning left to the next one here, and then it's gonna be flat out after this one all the way to the Ford SS. You can get a slowdown penalty very easily here, and that's one of the things we also have to talk about. If you run too wide here, you're gonna get a slowdown penalty, and that's gonna absolutely murder your chances of a good lap time. It's actually gonna invalidate your lap time, and during the race you can lose, if you take a slowdown penalty on first lap, you can lose like 2 to 3 seconds, and that means you're gonna lose the draft. And at that point, it's pretty much game over. So avoiding mistakes is going to be crucial. And here we have Randall coming to the line, 5:00.8, taking himself to 8th place.
Yeah, and I'm frankly surprised here during qualifying we're not seeing more of those sort of draft trains starting to develop. I would have thought that would have been the fastest way to get along by here as they go, trying to see what they can get, but that's what these drivers are doing. Watching now Marcus Beifeld as he works his way out of Indianapolis and down into Arnage, seeing what he can get, keeping everything nice and within the lines as they work their way around. Byfeld trying to improve here on a 4:59 flat. That's a pretty decent time, but it does find him about 2 seconds off of Jurgen Frank, who sits on the top with that 46.9. And while 2 seconds may seem like a massive distance, really and truly, with these underpowered skippies around Le Mans, that's not all that much time.
It's essentially draft down one straight, is what it means. Like the draft, we're gonna see lap times in the race be much faster than in qualifying, despite running more fuel, despite being in race conditions. If somebody just gets a clean draft and can get those clean passes, we can see lap times dropping a lot. And you can actually see the interesting part. Some people maybe mocking Circuit de la Sarthe, the Le Mans long historic track, the long Le Mans circuit, for essentially being a draft fest. And that's what it is. Like, you have to run to the draft. But the Porsche curves, when you come to the last sector of the track, they're actually very demanding. And you can see them fighting on the edge of the grip, getting really sideways here to the fourth chicanes as well, and really having to pull off all the stops. And we see Byfeld coming to the line. Is he able to improve? Yes, he is, by 8 1,000ths of a second, DJ. That's decent consistency, I would say.
Yeah, very good consistency, and it does pull him a little bit closer there to Josh Brain, directly ahead of him. Brain, who currently sits about 73 thousandths of a second up on him. Andre Solander right here coming through the Porsche curves right now. Looks like this is going to be a slow one for Solander, but he is pulling along. I believe that's Remco Pleisier there behind him, and so hopefully Remco will be able to take advantage of the draft, maybe get himself a little bit more speed as they come down here.
Yep, and let's see how much that benefits Remco here on the last sector. His current lap time not so good, but the next lap is what counts. And it's gonna be all about cooperation here as well. Now, like, okay, you can get to the draft, but then once you do get the draft, will Selander be able to actually, or does he want to give him room for a clean pass, or does he want to actually hold on to his racing line, you know, forcing him to the inside and so on? That's gonna have an effect as well. Here we see another draft duo, Josh Brain here on a fast lap, actually coming to the pit lane, so never mind that, in his Braun GP livery. It's always funny seeing a Formula 1 livery or Formula 1 inspired livery in a Skip Barber. I'll never get over it, DJ. I remember back in the day that back in 2014, 2015, when I was actually actively driving the Skip Barber series, and always the combination of a Ferrari livery and a Senna helmet in Skip Barber was essentially a warning flag. But you'd see that from time to time.
Yeah, you always got to watch out for those guys. As here comes Vladimir Stetskal coming across the line, unable to improve on a 5:05.2, it looks like, so he will stay back in 13th. Philip Hammer did get into the session, so your reigning champion and current champion will be able to put a time down. Looks like he is trying to put his first and only lap time down right now. We'll have to see how good of a time it is for the 60 as he works his way through the Ford chicanes right now. Really letting that tail end slide out there. Philip's going to come across the line and set down a mark of a 4:59.4. That's going to be good enough for 8th place. So he's going to have a little bit of work to do there.
Yep, and that's the kind of lap that he's going to probably be happier with than the last place starting position, because the last to first challenge, as fun as it can be, it can also lead to some unforeseen situations, as Randall taking a very wide line. I'm not sure if that's actually going to be a valid lap after that one, but yeah, pulling out all the stops here in the Porsche curves. So one of the things we're going to see in the early portions of the race is that if somebody's actually dropping out of the draft, like if you take it to Tertre Rouge, the corner leading to the first of the long back straights, taking it side by side through there, that's gonna mean losing a lot of time, as he's taking it side by side through the Porsche curves. So despite the draft being so strong, we might actually see the pack split up. And if you are in that pack that has split up and lost ground on the leaders, well, that's your race done, and there's only so much that even a driver of Philip Hammer's quality can do in that situation. So that's why starting on 8th place, being a little bit closer to the front, and potentially avoiding the calamity on the first lap, that's going to be great starting point for him. And that's what it's all about. It's all about starting point rather than putting down the absolute best lap and, you know, making sure you're the fastest driver. It's all about the starting point here, qualifying at Le Mans.
Yes, it is. And now checkered flag flies for that qualifying session. So drivers able to finish their hot laps here as they come around. Christopher Giros trying to see if he can improve right now. Trying to do better than a 13th placed 5:04.562. Giros is going to bring that car through the Ford chicanes. Very smooth line through there. I like the looks of that for him. He's going to bring it on out, and this is going to be an improvement if he was able to keep it all between the lines. That's a 5:02. That's going to bump him up only one position up into 12th, so a little bit of a minor improvement there. Here comes Gregory Nutley. He has yet to set a time down. The UK&I driver in the 007 machine. He's just got a few corners to go.
Yep, and let's see what Nutley can do. A squirrel's favorite snack for sure. 5 minutes have passed. 5:04, 5:05, and he's slowing down in the before the line, so that one's not gonna count for him. No qualifying time for Mr. Nutley, but that means that he'll be starting on the back for the race, which isn't the end of all things. Because as we are about to run you through the starting grid, DJ, the race itself, anyone can win, pretty much.
Yeah, it's really going to all just be about staying within that leading pack, Ozzy. That is going to be the way to be able to get by around here. It's not necessarily going to be as crucial, I think, as to qualify as far front as you want to do, as proven by the fact that Philip Hammer only back in 8th place. Now, he will be able to finish the current lap that he is on right now, so no worries there to be able to run through it on that regard. But definitely trying to see what they can do. I'm watching right now as Remco Pleisier tries to improve on his best time. He is going to come across the line here right about now. Looks like that was an improvement, but Pleisier will stay in 5th place, so that is not going to be a bump up the order there for him. Looks like we have a couple more drivers still to come through, including, I believe this is the 14th place machine of Vladimir Stedskal. They still have to come through. Jürgen Frank and Philip Hammer, the other two behind them, that will be trying to improve. Let's stay on board with Vladimir here as he pilots his way out of the Porsche curves, keeping everything nice and tidy and getting his way ready to line up now for the Ford chicanes.
Vladimir, where are you lining up in? Let's see about that one. 5:05.2, the best one so far. 450 has run through the clock. It's his last effort, absolutely, as the time has already expired, but the drivers can finish these laps at what they are running on right now. Taking a pretty decent line through the Ford curves, 10 approaching the checkered flag, and 5:04.3, so that means Stejskal is improving, but not improving his position. 7.4 seconds behind the leading time done by Jürgen Frank. And here we see Philip Hammer, DJ, the man to meet the legend this season, pretty much has clinched the championship, and as a result of that, actually not going to finish this lap.
Yeah, he's going to pull off down pit lane, and probably some good practice there to be able to do. It looks like behind him, Jürgen Frank, your current provisional pole sitter, is also going to try to practice that pit lane entry. Very precarious. You've got to really slow the car down in there. A couple of chicanes that you've got to work yourself through, and that is going to wrap up our qualifying by the look of it. Just waiting for the time to tick over there. So let's go ahead and run you through that starting grid now if we can. It will be Jürgen Frank lining up in pole position, followed by David Third Degree Burns, Josh Brandon, Marcus Beifeld behind them. Remco Pleisier and Wojciech Podacek will make up row 3, followed by Andre Solander and Philip Hammer. Watch for that number 60 to move his way through the field. Row 9 is going to be Jeff Randall and Alexander Wilford.
Yep, and we still have a couple of more drivers here in the starting grid behind the 10th position as we get those on the screen. So we have Tony Hayes starting 11th, Christopher Giraud starting 12th, then Frederic Neptune starting 13th, Vladimir Stejskal starting 14th, ahead of Mark Figueras, Gregory Nutley, and Dana Bowes. So 17 drivers in total for this race, and all of those 17 drivers are going to be looking for the best way to end their season. As we said, DJ, Philip Hammer has clinched the championship, but second place battle is pretty much still raging on. And having a victory here at Le Mans, I mean, it's a legendary venue. And this is probably for a lot of these drivers their best chance all season long to get that win, as we see the flyover and the French tricolor painting up the skies above Le Mans.
Yes, indeed, and drivers starting to grid up right now as we get ready to go racing. There comes the tricolor as it works its way overhead. One of the most historic and legendary sights in all of racing. And yeah, Ozzy, I have to agree with you. Winning here underneath that flyover, a very, very significant thing for these drivers. This ranks up there, obviously, with the likes of Indianapolis and Monaco in terms of the greatest circuits to get a win on. We look over the field here right now, just waiting for Alexander Wilford and Frederick Neptune to grid up before we can get the lights up and get action underway here at the Circuit de la Sarthe. It will be absolutely fantastic to see these 17 skippies do battle for the course of 50 minutes over here. Remember, 2 mandatory pit stops dictated by the fuel window, so we'll see some strategies come into play. We'll see some strategy when it comes to drafting as Wilford gets onto the grid and we get ready to go racing, waiting for the lights to come up as engines start to harmonize. 5 lights, and there goes the flag. We are racing at Le Mans. It looks like a pretty good start there from David Burns. He is going to immediately start to challenge a little bit on Jurgen Frank as these skippies get up to speed, sliding himself right into line there. Josh Brain sliding into position. Looks like the best starter of the day is going to be Wojciech Podacek with Andre Slander there behind as well. Little bit of coming together there as they work their way through the Dunlop curve for the first time.
They are, and looking pretty clean so far. A couple of brake lockups here. Still cold tires these drivers do have to mind. And I wonder about tire pressures here, because that is one of the things you can adjust in a Skip Barber car, the tire pressures. And I wonder how many drivers in this series have gone for the trick of increasing their tire pressures to decrease the rolling resistance and maybe bring a couple of extra k's an hour or miles per hour of top end speed. So if the guys have high tire pressures, then they're going to be a little bit better off early on because of the tires, the cold tires not having such a big effect, but also a little bit worse off in those corners. So keep an eye on that as Frank leads, Burns leads, Brain leads, Byfeld leads, Fleischer, and no big breakups so far in the pack, but already some drivers are looking to go side by side.
And one of those drivers will be David Burns, immediately looking his way into the lead there as they go. And they come along now. There, Burns pulls out into the lead. Josh Brain and Marcus Byfeld going to be closing in behind Jurgen Frank as they get onto the braking zones for the first of the chicanes here on the Mulsanne straight. Huge lift there for Jurgen Frank. I think he knew he wanted to let off a little bit as they went onto the straightaway. Everyone's still within draft range of one another. It looks like this is going to be a big, long draft train.
Apart from Nutley, Nutley has lost time in the first lap and he's dropped 18 seconds back from the leader, so you could see him on that previous shot in the background just approaching the first of the chicanes. So yeah, Gregory Nutley losing the draft, everybody else still within the range, and you can see some breaks forming up as they are 3 wide behind. Philip Hammer involved in that one on the outside line.
Yeah, that looks like it is Gyros, Hammer, Neptune, almost 4 wide going down into the second chicane. A little bit squirrely, but they're able to get themselves all sorted out. That'll be Gyros leading Hammer, leading Solander, leading Neptune. Couple of drivers still getting pushed out a little bit wide. I think that's Alexander Wilford and Jeff Randall. But now they line themselves back up here as we watch Philip Hammer trying to claw his way up through the field. He's already going to get that move done. He wants to be a part of that leading group as quickly as possible. There you see a little bit more side by side. That's going to be Marcus Byfeld up and by Wojciech Podacek as they break down into Mulsanne.
A lot of what happens in Skip Barber official racing and league racing is also happening here, which is the leaders don't want to really fight each other. They want to swap positions. Oh, and I think that was Brain taking very wide line through the Mulsanne corner, completely breaking himself out of it and taking a detour through the bunker, as we would call it in golf, and losing 1 position as a result. But as I was saying, these guys don't want to really fight each other early on because it doesn't really matter what position you are as long as you are in that leading draft. Instead, you're looking for the draft, maximizing each other's lap times, helping each other on a little bit here. As I say that, Burns and Frank actually do have a decent chance here for a bit of a breakaway, because we are approaching a technical section, the Arnage corner, the Indianapolis corner, in reverse order. And if they can get a good run through here, and if the drivers behind are maybe a little bit too careful, then these guys can get away, especially through the Porsche curves. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But wouldn't it be a great result for these two, Dave Burns and Jürgen Frank, to actually break the toe early on in this race, DJ?
Well, if they can break the toe early on, that will be relatively done and dusted for the rest of the field. They'll have to work a whole lot to try to gain it back. Vocek, currently the driver trying to hold on to the back of them right now. He is within about a second of them, so that will just get a little whiff of the draft as they go around, diving down into the first of the Porsche curves here. You can see Vocek really starting to close in a little bit as Jürgen Frank looking to be a little bit antsy almost, trying to see if he can maybe get a move done on Burns. It seemed like as they danced their way through these curves, Potacek continuing to close in the rest of that train behind him, stretching all the way back to Vladimir Stutskal in 14th. Who is the driver who has lost a little bit of time here as a result of all of this. Now as they exit the curves, Ozzy doing exactly what you suspected. Potacek losing a little bit of time there in the gap up to a full second.
Yep, so it's pretty much the same as it started off with, but I wonder if it would have been more clever to let Jürgen Frank, who maybe has a bit more pace, to actually lead them through the Porsche curves. Didn't happen, unfortunately for them, and as a result of that, Potacek was able to catch them up. Meanwhile, behind them, Fleischer and Brain looking to swap positions, with Brain climbing up to 4th place in that Braun GP livery, and Philip Hammer right behind them, making it 3 wide on the main straight behind the leader. So Philip Hammer certainly doesn't want to lose sight of the leading duo. Even if he has the championship clinched, he's a racing driver, and racing drivers, above all else, love winning. So he is in a good position, but has to hold on to the pack of Potacek and then hope Potacek can do the same to Burns and Frank.
Exactly, and that gap between Burns and Frank only about 0.2 of a second. The gap between Potacek and Frank about 1 second right here. The same is true of the gap between Hammer and Potacek, although now that gap looking like it's closing down a little bit as they now head out of Tetra Rouge and work their way onto the Mulsanne for the second time. Let the draft party begin, ladies and gentlemen, as we get going here. There you see Josh Brain defending a little bit from Remco Pleisier. Looks like behind them Marcus Beifeld trying to pull himself along with Remco Pleisier as they work their way. A little bit of side-by-side action there coming down. That is your closest battle. Ooh, that is a slowdown for Wojciech Potacek. That is massive. That means that Hammer has lost the draft.
Well, not quite. He still has a tiny bit of it from 1.6 seconds away. But you're right, if Burns and Frank play this cleverly, if they can swap the positions in the lead, and if Frank can get a little bit closer, if Burns realizes the situation, they have a chance to drop Philip Hammer. It's now 1.8 to the lead, but the crucial gap, 1.5 to Jürgen Frank. That is the draft that Philip Hammer is trying to get. Fleischer, Brain, Beifeld, Gelot, Potacek, everybody trying to hold on to the back of that queue, but I think they'd be pretty wise to lead Philip Hammer lead this one, because Philip Hammer is their best shot for a one-way ticket to paradise under these shining lights and to the battle for victory in this race. But yeah, we are living in crucially exciting times here, DJ, with this lead battle as they continue to battle behind them. And now Philip Hammer is just pretty much having to wait for the technical sections of the track to start and catch up again, because on these straight lines he's bleeding time, hand over fist, now 2 seconds from the lead.
Yeah, 2 seconds from the lead, just missing out on that draft, and that is certainly going to hurt him. It looks like behind him, that is going to be Remco Pleisier that attempts to get up on by him, maybe playing a little bit of a game of leapfrog there to try to get their way up ahead before they break down into the Mulsanne corner. Pleisier now leading that gap at about 1.7 seconds in between the two. Hammer getting a better run off of Mulsanne, though. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him doing exactly that. Behind there, that was Wojciech Potacek running a little bit wide at the exit of Mulsanne, able to catch it and gather it up back underneath him to keep going, but it looks like it's going to at least cost him a position here to Jeff Randall.
It is, and that's what they want to do, because they have now lost the draft to the second pack. So that's one of the things that they have to now do, work together. And here we see a replay of it, coming down the braking zone, doing the same thing as Josh Brain did on the first lap, just a little bit too late on the brakes, trying to push it maybe a bit too much. And once you lose the grip, you do lose the grip with those tires. They are pretty much road tires, they're not track slicks, so there's not too much grip on offer. And after running through a long straight, you can maybe think throughout the straight that, oh, you know, you can just run, maybe brake 10 meters later, 20 meters later. Truth is, you really can't. And as you see the battle behind Randall and Neptune, going very close with each other, with Randall making a bit of a mistake actually on the Indianapolis corner, allowing Potocek to get a little bit away, and Potocek using all of the Arnage turn on the exit in turn to gain a little bit of time on Gelo. And that might be the saving grace for him, because he's now 1.8 seconds away, and as a result of that, getting a bit of drag as they are side by side behind him once again. Not the fastest way, guys, but certainly entertaining.
Yeah, certainly entertaining there. And the bad news here for Philip Hammer as they go through the technical twisty bits is that he's seen that gap up to Jürgen Frank and David Burns expand to 1.9 seconds. So certainly out of draft range there. He's going to have to work together with this train behind him of Remco Plaisir, Josh Brain, Marcus Beifeld, and Christopher Giros to try to get their way back forward. But that is the battle that we keep our eye on right now. Jürgen Frank doing a lot of lifting and coasting in that second place position. He looks relatively content to stay where he is, not necessarily needing to push all that far ahead. Hammer trying his best through the technical sections to gain back in, but it just doesn't look like he quite has the speed to be able to do so.
Yeah, now he needs some partners. He needs help from Plaisir, from Brain, maybe Beifeld, to try and form a 3-4 car draft train as Philip Hammer puts on the fastest lap so far, which is a good start, but he is now bleeding time. He does no longer have to draft. So now he has to be fast on the technical sections and get some help down the straight line, and hope that these drivers can cooperate, that they can use the numbers in order to make up the advantage that Burns and Frank have so far. Mind you, another point, we are still early on in this race, only on lap number 3, I do believe, but the championship standings, we know Philip Hammer has clinched championship lead as he actually lets Plaisir lead him onto the back straight, but David Burns is 1 point ahead of Andre Selander in the second place of the championship. Now David Burns is so far leading this race, looking sweet. Where is Andre Selander? 11th place. No man's land.
Exactly. We ride on board here with Philip Hammer, and I believe, unless my eyes deceive me, that he picked up a slowdown penalty potentially coming through Tete Rouge. Yeah. Oh, it was before. It was coming down out of the curves there, out of the S before the Tete Rouge, just picking up that slight one down through Dunlop. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. And what that has done is that has allowed for this gap to just continue to grow and grow and grow for your leaders. There you can see it visualized on your screen. That is a gap of about 2.7 seconds between the back of Jürgen Frank and Remco Plaisir, and that is well out of the draft. That is not good news for this trailing group.
Not at all, and that's an unforced error on the part of Philip Hammer. And that's what we talked about before the race, briefly during the qualifying. The slowdown penalties, they're going to hurt so much. Thankfully for Philip Hammer, it wasn't on the first lap, so he had a delta time. And that means that when you get a slowdown penalty, it's going to compare your time to the delta time if it exists. A delta time is your previous lap time or the best lap time or the average of toes. And it compares to that and sees how much time you have to give up. Now on the first lap of the race, you don't have a delta time, so you lose so much more when the simulation thinks that, okay, you have to still let up, and it's gonna essentially bring a higher number. So that means that a slowdown penalty on the first lap can absolutely ruin your race, whereas in the laps after that, you can see Philip Hammer is still in that pack where he wants to be, still able to make up positions, having to lose track position, sure, having to give it up, but he can make that back. Now he has to hope no more mistakes come, and that this back with Plaisir, with Brain, with Beifeld, with Gero is able to hold on to a good pace. But you can just see how much Philip Hammer is actually having to try here, taking slowdown penalties, absolutely bringing his maximum to each and every corner, trying to pick up half a tenth here, maybe a full tenth of a second pair, just to minimize the time lost on the leaders. But what he can't do here, is he can't fuel save. He can't fuel save at all. This is what the leaders can do, and in turn get a shorter pit stop for themselves.
Well, and we should say with the leaders here fuel saving, I really think at this point only one of them is able to fuel save. That's Jürgen Frank. Ever since David Burns took control of this race, Frank has just stayed tucked up behind and hasn't moved at all. So I think maybe as we come here on to lap 3, we may have to see a couple of these drivers pop down pit lane. Ozzy, you speculated that lap 3, lap 4 would be the opening of that pit stop winner. Pit stop window, excuse me, as they come across.
Yeah, and some of the drivers might be opting for that. Now, this is not the ideal situation for David Burns because he would want Jürgen Frank to work with him in the lead. They would ideally swap positions each and every time they come onto a long straight. Each time Frank catches to the back of Burns, he would get past Burns in turn to give toe to Burns, then allowing Burns to get past him. They would be swapping positions multiple times each and every lap. Instead, what is happening here is that Jürgen Frank is essentially taking this show for himself, you know, taking this opportunity for himself so that he can save fuel. And look at where that resulted in. David Burns coming to the pit lane here because he didn't want to give essentially free fuel saving advantage to Jürgen Frank, and that is an aggressive move so early on. And let's see if we have any other takers for the early pit stop, or if David Burns is going to have to run a lap around all by himself. And those who are fans of American racing will know how much that affects you. It's the same thing as getting hung out to dry on the pit stops in Daytona or Talladega. You're going to lose a lot of time.
You're going to lose a lot of time as this whole flock of skippies coming down pit lane here. Yeah, Hammer, absolutely everybody. Burns, Beifeld, Pleisier, Hammer, Giros, Salander, Potacek, Randall, Wilford, Hayes, Stezcall, Figueras, and Bose all coming down. It looks like Josh Brain was also able to stay out. Look at that. The gap coming down a little bit between David Burns and Philip Hammer. Burns losing some time in the pit stop cycle. It looks like he lost there probably about 0.6 of a second, I would say, to Philip Hammer, and that is not good news for David Burns, but that is certainly music to the ears of Philip Hammer.
Yeah, I don't know, because David Burns would ideally want some help on this lap, because this is the lap he can actually drop Jürgen Frank. Look at Jürgen Frank here in the lead, German driver. He is 4.7 seconds ahead of Josh Brain. Is he getting any draft? No, he is absolutely not getting any draft. In turn, Philip Hammer is getting draft. He can potentially catch up to David Burns here. This is excellent news for Philip Hammer. Decent news for David Burns if he can work with Philip Hammer. And really precarious times for Jürgen Frank. But in turn, the pit stop is going to be shorter for these two drivers who were able to stay out, Jürgen Frank and Josh Brain. So the strategic game is going to be very, very, very exciting here. We're going to get some answers in half a lap's time on where they situate.
Yes, we will. And I guess the question here is there's a chance if they may be able to go. If you can make it to 30 to go, you should be able to make it to the end. No, excuse me, my math is wrong. Never trust a commentator. You need to make it to 25 to the end as you go around. So my problem there for the math, he will not be able to one stop it here. I think he still will need to make 2 stops.
Yeah, I'm just gonna come straight here. DJ, that was not your fault. That was our director, Joe Peak, giving us the information from behind the scenes. So yeah.
I was trying to save face for Joe there and say it was my fault. Way to throw him under the bus, Ozzy.
Yeah, that's what I do best. Thank you very much. And I'm gonna get fired after this broadcast. So anyway, here you can see Jürgen Frank actually winning a lot over Josh Brain. Now the gap's up to 7 seconds. It was around 4.5 at the start of this lap. I wonder if Brain's having to fuel save a lot more than he intended at first, because he's losing time. Hand over fist here on clean track. Is it fuel? Look at here on the straight. He's once again losing 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10. He's not going at full speed at all.
Let's listen in here to the lift and coast, especially as he comes down through Arnage in Indianapolis.
That's not full throttle. Yeah, he's short shifting a lot, and the problem is that what Josh Brain is trying to achieve by short shifting is essentially run on lower revs and hope that he doesn't use as much fuel. Well, I got bad news, Josh Brain. That's not how fuel saving works on iRacing. It's all about the throttle position here. You can save a tiny bit of fuel maybe by short shifting, but mostly it's about throttle position. So if you run on like 80% throttle, you're gonna save a lot of fuel. You're gonna save a brilliant amount of fuel by essentially lifting off the throttle early on in the braking zone and lift and coasting. That's why you do a lot of lift and coasting, and that's why you can even on oval racing turn off the engine sometimes and essentially let it coast, especially under caution, but also in some fuel saving races on super speedways when you have a lot of draft to work with. So I'm not sure this short shifting strategy is such a good one on Josh Brain, but maybe if he watches the race back, wants to see how he does, wants to see what we said about that, well, there you go. Short shifting doesn't really work for fuel saving, and as a result of that, he's lost 10 seconds to the leader, who is right here, Mr. Jürgen Frank. And as he comes to the pit stop, he still has to do the same amount of pit stops as everybody else, but his pit stop will be shorter, and he'll be able to run, I think, 2 laps longer actually, no, 1 lap longer on the next stint. So we'll see how much he benefits of that. David Burns now 37 seconds away as he breaks to the pit lane, and Philip Hammer now still catching some of the draft from David Burns.
Yeah, still catching a little bit of it, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where Jürgen Frank ends up in all of this, because if he comes out in between Burns and Hammer, that is going to be a boon to Philip Hammer. It'll be able to pull him along a little bit more as they go. All right, so there is Jürgen Frank coming to rest in his box. No tires changed on these cars. It's just going to be a fuel stop here for Frank. There is Josh Brain. He was able to make it to the end. He didn't sputter, so that's at least good news for them. There comes Frank out of the pits, waiting to see where everybody else is going to shake out. I can hear them coming on by right now. There goes Burns, and Frank is going to be right behind him. And the good news for Hammer, that gap is going to be about 0.7 of a second, so he's going to be able to pick up a nice little draft here down the Mulsanne.
Well, that worked out beautifully for Philip Hammer. Not only was he able to somewhat hold on to the back of David Burns during that 1 lap, but now he has dropped everybody behind him and he's able to get to that leading duo. He's 1 second away, he's getting a good amount of draft. If he doesn't screw up here, don't take another slowdown penalty now, Philip, then he is able to fight for the win in this race with Jürgen Frank, with David Burns. I must say, so far, Jürgen Frank has been very, very impressive. Not only his fuel saving, but also that late stop, being able to hold down decent pace, being able to drop Josh Brain, and now fighting for the win. You got David Burns, who has a win this season. You got Philip Hammer, who has a win this season. And you got Jürgen Frank with no wins. Let's see if he can get his first one here from Le Mans.
Well, my question now here for Frank is if he continues to just want to be in this position, just stay behind David Burns and let Burns burn off that fuel and try to extend a little bit longer on this next pit stop cycle. May be interesting to see. He runs a little bit wide there as Hammer, I think it is safe to say, has fully caught up to the back of this field, only 0.5 of a second back. They have a whopping 4 seconds, almost 5, back to Kleiser and Marcus Beifeld. The rest of the field has really spaced themselves out here over pit stops. There you can see closing in is Jürgen Frank. I think he's feathering that throttle a little bit, not letting it go full bore as they work their way down the second part rather, of the Mulsanne, going into the second chicane right now. Everybody onto the binders as they concertina together.
And once we talk about the engines, let me remind everybody watching, not maybe familiar with this E-Barber car, it has a 2-liter inline-4 engine with a single overhead camshaft. So it's not like super modern or technical of an engine design, producing around 150 horsepower, but it's still enough to put this 550 kilo or 1,200 pound car to a reasonable top speed. They do over 130 miles an hour or over 200 kilometers per hour. It's still a pretty fast car, and with fuel saving, you can do a fair bit, even if it's not using as much fuel as, for example, Formula 1 cars or full-bore NAS cars. Now, interestingly, Philip Hammer here is losing time. Did he take a slowdown penalty? I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're the champion this season. You can't take another slowdown penalty, especially when the table is catered for you. You have the table, you have the silverware, you have the 7-course meal. It's right there for you. You have worked down so hard for it, and then you take a slowdown penalty.
Well, remember, that's the second one that he has taken this race. Yeah. That is very surprising from Hammer. We are not used to seeing him make mistakes like that. This is an altogether uncharacteristic run for your reigning champion.
It is. I wonder if part of it is down to the fact that he might not be so familiar with the circuit. I mean, Le Mans is the kind of circuit which is not often run on the smaller series like Skip Barber's. It's not a very technical circuit, and if he doesn't do the special events, and if he doesn't do this track very much, and you know, he might be unfamiliar with the track limits, especially coming in so late to the qualifying as he tends to do. So maybe that's part of it, you know, taking it carefully enough. Maybe it's just mental lapses, as I mentioned earlier, that can pretty much be a factor when you have this long stretch and you have a lot of time to unwind and relax. So yeah, and the slowdown penalty this time was a pretty surprising one, which is something you don't think instinctively, DJ. I think you watched it back and found out what caused it.
Yes, I did. It was running wide on the entrance into the Mulsanne hairpin, and you can pick up a slowdown by trying to take too much of that entrance curbing, and that's exactly what happened there for Philip Hammer. And so that is what set him down the order, and I think that is exactly to your point there, Ozzy, just a little bit of unfamiliarity with the track, and that throwing him off a little bit. But we focus back in the field right now. This is Wojciech Podacek and Andrej Selander currently dicing it out over 8th place right now as they come out of the Porsche curves, headed down into the Ford chicane. Leaders starting lap 6 right now as we hit the halfway point here in this race.
We do, and Selander here not being in a position where he necessarily wants to be, reminding you once again that he was 1 point behind David Burns in the championship standings. In 3rd place, David Burns in 2nd place, going into this race, but now David Burns leading this one, and Andrej Selander will be dropping a lot if he finishes 8th or 9th compared to David Burns, compared to the guys near the front. So that's not ideal for him, and there's very little he can actually do, because ahead of them you have 1.5 seconds to Josh Brain. He's someone who they can maybe catch up to, and if Josh Brain can hang on to the back of Geraud, then yeah, 6th place is in the cards, but that's about it. Unless top 5 makes a mistake, there's no chance they'll be catching up to them, not on raw pace. Oh, both of them running wide! Wow, that's that's Podacek hitting the wall, and just before that, Rouge, and Selander also running wide, but taking advantage by essentially being able to alleviate his mistake, being able to avoid that wall. Here you can see it once again, DJ. That's not one you see very often, but certainly a very difficult corner, this left-right.
Yeah, it really is, especially in these skip. He's trying to carry as much speed as this. You can see, oh, he caught the curbs. That's what it was. He went a little bit too deep on the entrance of the corner, and I think the car just bottomed out over those high curbs. And Selander there just frankly going off track in sympathy. There was no contact, none of that in between the two. It was just Selander having a little bit of incident fixation that took him off track with him.
Yeah, target fixation as well as incident fixation. That is something that can happen so easily when you're following another driver. You copy their lines, you find out what they do, you essentially try to see, okay, he's trying to gain an advantage there, I'm gonna do that too. Well, a pro tip, if the driver in front of you takes a line through a high curb, maybe don't follow them, just a tip. But again, it's something to take away in the future. It's funny, it looks a little bit silly, but it can happen easier than you think, and I can assure you, even a lot of the top drivers have followed somebody else into the sandpit, so to speak, as we see a position change between Byfeld and Fleischer. Now trying to catch up to Philip Hammer, not quite able to pull it off. Philip Hammer still able to hold on to the leaders decently well, but 3.5 seconds back, and that's gotta be frustrating for him.
Yeah, it's got to be super, super frustrating. He knows he's got the outright pace, and he has just got to hope that he'll be able to do what he did in the last pit stop cycle and more, and maybe be able to jump his way up ahead a little bit. I anticipate we could see drivers coming down as early as this lap, if not next lap, for the majority of the field. We'll have to see exactly how that plays out. I think your prediction, Ozzy, of about a 10-lap race looking to be just about right or so, as they work their way down from the run from Mulsanne. And now we're seeing a little bit of aggression here out of Jürgen Frank for the first time in this race. He is tired of sitting behind the red 125, or the orange 125, I know colors, as they come out of that corner. And that's going to be Jürgen Frank up into the lead.
It is, and that's for the first time in this race, I believe. He started on the pole, but then he just gave up the lead on lap number 1, and now he wants it back. David Burns probably, wonder if David actually lifted enough, because David has to save 1 lap of fuel, mind you. If he comes in on at some point, because if he comes in after lap number 6, then it's going to be difficult for him to go on until the end, because he's going to run out of fuel after lap number 9. If it's going to be a 10-lap race, well, you can do the math on that one. But they're pretty close on fuel, mind you. They're pretty close between the boundary of 3 and 4 laps, so David Burns doesn't have to do too much here. And a comment from our director, and that's actually a good question, DJ. I want to talk with you about this briefly. We can't do math, we can't tell colors. What good are commentators for? And my answer is, we're very good at talking over moving pictures.
I was going to say that and making weird noises. That tends to be what we are best at. So
yes.
if you need a soundtrack for your life, we've got you covered. Just don't ask us to do math or any rudimentary tasks that a kindergartner could do.
Yes, it's weird noises. I have to remind the viewers who are not familiar with that reference, go and look at the GSRC, Global SimRacing Channel YouTube channel, and the 2021 Not So Best of GSRC video, because I believe we have also released it independently as David Burns once again comes to the pit lane. We have released it independently, the DJ Clark soundboard, which is a lot of different noises made by our friend here on the commentary booth, DJ Clark, because you like to make a lot of noises in the commentary booth, at least.
I can't help it. It just comes out naturally. I've tried to fight it, and it doesn't exactly go so well. But as we see here, the majority of our field coming down pit lane, it again looks like Frank and Brain, the only two that are going to be staying out here at this point. So I think that pass from Jürgen Frank was definitely a recognition that he wanted to be in the lead as they went in, didn't want to find himself behind David Burns as they went into this next pit stop cycle. There is Josh Brain as well, also looking like he is able to make it 1 extra lap here on fuel.
One suggestion for Josh Brain, aside from the fuel saving thing that I mentioned earlier on. Yeah, don't short shift if you want to fuel save on iRacing, but he has that Braun GP livery, right? Can we get a close-up on actually Josh Brain's livery, if we could please, Joe? And here we go, thank you. It says Braun GP, right? Why doesn't it say Brain GP? It wouldn't be that difficult of a change to make, and it would be brilliant.
I got to agree with you there. I can't believe we've been covering this series for however long we have, and we've never thought to do it, because that is a very familiar livery for Josh Brain. Josh, if you're listening on playback, talk to us. We can maybe help you a little bit with the Photoshop on that to get that changed.
Yeah, that helmet, I love that, by the way. It's very much mushroom samba going on, that one. But yeah, we are seeing now the Brain GP car, as we are now entitled to call it, here on position number 2, 15 seconds back on leader Jürgen Frank. And on the second pit stop, David Burns was also able to extend the gap behind him to Philip Hammer, where it's now 4 seconds flat. Mark Speifeld still holding on to the back of Philip Hammer somewhat, less than 2 seconds away, as is Fleischer, those two swapping positions outside of your pictures, and might be able to work together here and maybe catch up to the back of Philip Hammer as well. I know it's Le Mans, but working together, catching up to Philip Hammer, I mean, beating Philip Hammer, that's a scalp you can be proud of.
Yeah, very, very much so. And we saw that fierce battle shake itself out 2 weeks ago between Burns and Hammer going down into the final stages of the race at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. As we watch here, drivers working around each other. That is Byfeld and Pleisier swapping positions back and forth a little bit as they go in. Pleisier having a little bit of a look. I'm getting the sense that he doesn't necessarily want Byfeld to lead. Now, remember, these drivers are done with their pit stop cycle, so it is a straight up race here at this point between the two.
It is, but they have to save fuel just a tiny bit to make that final lap. Those guys who haven't you know, saved that one more lap earlier on. So Frank and Brain don't have to save fuel, but everybody else does have to save a little bit still. They are swapping positions, Pleisier and Byfeld doing a very good job of that on the straight line. You can actually see how they can move aside on a straight line, and even Byfeld doing the favor of moving away from the racing line just to let Pleisier have the optimal line into the Mulsanne corner. They turn the 90-degree right-hander and are looking to catch on to the back of Philip Hammer. Mind you, Philip Hammer, he's been true to his brand of absolutely driving the wheels out of that Skip Barber. He's been excellent in this race, despite the mistakes. I've been watching him each and every time on that Mulsanne corner, and you just can't use the track any more than Philip Hammer does. Actually, if I may, can we jump on board of him? I want to see how he does this Indianapolis Arnage section. One of the more difficult places on this track usually, because this right-hander before Indianapolis, it's almost flat out, but you really have to start braking with the bigger cars already during it. So you cut down to the inside, hold it tight to the inside, then brake around here and turn the bank corner left, using all of the exit almost there, doing very well so far, and using all of the track at Arnage, not running too wide, 90-degree right, and there you go. He didn't get as close to that barrier as he has a couple of last times around, but still able to make up some ground maybe to the drivers behind. But I can see that he's not taking as many risks as he was earlier on. I think he has to be, you know, realizing the fact that, okay, if they can run through the Porsche curves well, the drivers behind can catch up to him on these long straights. So there's no point pushing right now.
Yeah, exactly. I think he is just in a little bit of coast mode as Jürgen Frank does come down pit lane as expected, your leader into the pits. It'll be interesting to see where he shakes out in regard to David Burns. That what we anticipate being the battle for the lead with under 15 minutes to go left in this race. That was a wide run there out of the corner, looked like by Remco Pleisier. I think he may have actually picked up a slowdown penalty potentially with the way he is losing time through the Porsche curves. And that battle with Marcus Byfeld as a result coming to a little bit of a stop. Waiting to see here with David Burns, though, as that is Jürgen Frank stationary on pit lane. David Burns working his way through the Ford chicanes right now. Let's see where the two of them will shake themselves out. This is the battle for the lead of the race. Frank already up and going. The question here is going to be as if Burns' speed is going to be able to carry him in behind, and I don't think it is. My goodness gracious, talk about a gap.
Yeah, there is an Atlantic Ocean between these two people. Jürgen Frank in the lead, 4 seconds ahead of David Burns. That is massive, and that is what the fuel saving did for him. That's why he did all that fuel saving earlier on, to get that extra lap, get a shorter pit stop last time around. He was able to save a full lap of fuel, which is not insignificant in terms of refueling on that last pit stop. And the refueling is done pretty much with, you know, it's not a Formula 1 style or Formula 1 style refueling. It's a long refueling stop, and they have to fill up the cars once again. And David Burns able to save around 3 seconds in his pit stop. Jürgen Frank able to save around 3 seconds of his pit stop time. And he has now broken the draft. So Jürgen Frank here, 12 minutes to go. He can already see the checkered flag. He can already see the victory. But now it's all about avoiding those mistakes, and you can just see the gap here on the straight line. David Burns 4 seconds away. Then it's Philip Hammer, Pleisier, and Byfeld gonna be battling it out for the final spot of the podium.
Well, and it's crucial that I think you mentioned those avoiding those mistakes, almost running a little bit wide there coming through that first chicane was Jürgen Frank. We've seen how many drivers that we thought were untouchable. Looking at you, Philip Hammer, making mistakes over the course of this race, picking up those off tracks, picking up those little bits and bobbles. You know, we talk about this Le Mans circuit quite often. We don't talk about necessarily just how tricky it is. I mean, it is a very challenging circuit, especially in these skippies where you need to carry as much momentum through the corners as possible to keep your speed up. Speaking of good speed, here comes Marcus Beifeld on a little move on Remco Pleisier.
Yep, and he is moving aside and moving past Fleischer, so taking back that 4th place and crucially catching up to the back of Philip Hammer. That's who they're catching, make no mistake. Position swapping, it's all done in good health. Both of them working together in order to catch Philip Hammer, in order to get the podium position in this race, and then we are gonna see proper battle for the final spot on top of the main straight, the Le Mans podium. One of the most beautiful sights in motorsport, I have to say, because after the race, after the 24-hour race, you can just see all the people crowding in there, and you can just see the teams, the winning teams, winning drivers, you know, spraying champagne over everybody. Same for 2nd and 3rd. It's a beautiful thing, and it's something to aspire to. But yeah, this is now the gap, and it's not very big. But I wonder, now that he's being caught up, catching up is one thing, overtaking is another. Overtaking is easy, but how will Philip Hammer play this game? I wonder how much he actually has experience in terms of tight battles like this.
A little bit of an internet blink there for Hammer. That'll certainly put his competitors off charts a little bit. And yeah, I mean, we've seen him be able to battle relatively well earlier on in races, but once it comes to the later stages of the race, Hammer's normally checked out by this point, so we'll have to see if anything happens there to him. Looks like he's going to just give that position up for right now, maybe hold on. I think maybe another mistake there coming into play for Philip Hammer as he picked up maybe a slowdown penalty potentially again, and that's what put him back into the clutches of Beifeld and Pleisier. This is now a battle for that final podium position. Frank and Burns completely checked out at the front of the field.
They have, and the gap is staying pretty consistent. Burns was able to catch up a couple of tenths at the early portion of the lap, but then Jürgen Frank just putting the hammer down, so to speak, and being able to extend that gap back to 3.7 seconds. So not expecting too much to change there. Mind you, it's still not over for the lead, but it has to be a mistake from Jürgen Frank if David Burns is to catch him up at this stage. But yeah, Beifeld versus Fleischer versus Hammer. Now, the reason I speculated about Hammer's experience in racing is that if you are used to running away with the race at certain point, you might not have that much knowledge in how to win a strategy battle. Because these guys, Beifeld and Fleischer, they've been running pretty much middle of the pack throughout the season. They've been involved in tight battles, close battles that, you know, are decided at the last point of the race on the last lap. They know how to place their car, how to position it. They have the strategic know-how, whereas Hammer may not have that wealth of information to work off of. So in this case, it might be the turtle that wins the hare, as Beifeld makes a bit of a mistake on the 4 chicanes and allows Fleischer to get past him.
Yes, he does, and as they cross over the line, I'm seeing there that it is 2 laps to go, and David Burns back down pit lane. Did he underfuel the car, I wonder? My goodness, a rare mistake here from Third Degree. We do not normally see this. He is coming back down into the pits. If this is maybe a 5-second pit stop, I think that's a slight underfuel there for the 125. Yep, that's exactly what it is. David Burns underfueling the car.
Wow, I was wondering if it's a pit lane penalty, but no, he underfueled the car and he went from 3rd degree Burns to 3rd degree Burns in an instant here on that lap, getting passed by Wilford as well, dropping all the way down to 9th. You know what that means? It's gonna throw the second for the championship on its head. Now, Andreas Elander is in 7th place. He's checked out. He's 4-5 seconds ahead of these guys with 7.5 minutes to go. And if it stays like this, Andreas Elander is going to steal 2nd place in the championship away from David Burns. But what David Burns has is a couple of buddies, Wilford and Randall. these guys have to work together, and I think Burns is about ready to say on the radio, look guys, let's catch up to the guy ahead, please, I'll buy you a round if we do.
I certainly wouldn't be surprised at all, as there you can see Wilford just getting, or Gyros rather, getting let through there. Excuse me, that's not any of them. That's actually Jeff Randall getting let through. I'll get the names right eventually here. See, commentators, we're not good at math, we're not good at colors, we're not good at names, we're not good at anything. Whoa! That was a little bit hairy there. I think the blood is up behind the wheel of that 125.
He wants to assert dominance here. That's what that was all about. I wouldn't go for that gap. I think he was hoping that, you know, the drivers are going to open that gap a little bit more. They weren't. Thankfully able to avoid contact there, were the three of them, Randall, Burns, and Wilford. Now Wilford being tossed to the back of the cube. And I think Burns is going to want to get past Randall in short order here as well. But he has to keep in mind that he needs the help of these guys. He can't anger these guys too much. He needs their help in order to catch up to the back of Selander here. But so far, so good. So far, so good indeed. David Burns back in 8th. 3.5 seconds is the gap, and they are gaining all the time in this draft queue. Now, will it continue that way? Are they able to work together? Can they coexist is the question we ask a lot in pro wrestling, and we ask a lot in racing as well.
Yes, it is. And three drivers who are learning to coexist are right now Pleiser, Byfeld, and Hammer. As they continue to go around here, 1, 2, 3. I'm getting the sense, Ozzy, that they're just kind of holding themselves back a little bit, waiting for the calm before the storm. As I mentioned, 2 laps to go at the line last time. They are coming to the white flag here on this lap. So maybe waiting a little bit to launch the full attack, doing a little bit of fuel saving here if you are Byfeld or Hammer, so you are able to be on full rich for the entirety of the white flag lap.
Indeed, and you have 5 long straights where you can swap positions on the last lap. So you come down to the first of the Mulsanne straight, then the chicane, then the second of the Mulsanne straight, that's another swap, and then again a chicane, then you come to the Mulsanne corner, that's a third driver swap, then on the run down to Indianapolis, that's a 4th one, and then the run down to Porsche curves, that's a 5th one. Now, the last one is the crucial one, because once you're ahead to the Porsche curves, there's very little a driver behind can do to mount an overtake. Maybe a brave move into the 4th chicane on the last lap. We might see that happen, but you pick up a slowdown penalty so easily if you run that wide, and it's easy to just move the car to the inside if you're in front. So the driver who is the first of this queue coming down to the Porsche curves, at this point on the last lap, so on the next lap, the driver who is ahead of this pack at this point is going to most likely win this battle for 2nd place. Now, how do you work yourself into that position during the course of that last lap is what every one of these drivers is thinking right now. They have to play this right, they have to play this strategic, and we might even see somebody, you know, refusing to lead the pack into after Arnage, you know, not wanting to get the draft pass done, instead just wanting somebody to pass them and, you know, getting that position back. So all of them are thinking the same thing, but you can't afford a slowdown penalty, you can't afford any sort of mistake, and most importantly, you can't afford to make your move too obvious.
Yeah, exactly. There is a whole bunch of strategy that gets into play. Oh my goodness, more drivers coming down pit lane. That's Byfeld and Pleiser, both unable to make it here. Philip Hammer is going to stay out, and he's going to inherit 2nd place.
Oh, so it's not just the commentators who can't do math here, it seems.
No, not at all. And unless my calculations are wrong, Wojciech Podacek also coming in. That's going to give Josh Brain 3rd place here. What is this going to do to David Burns in terms of his battles? He has looked like he's been able to slightly catch up to the back of Andre Selander, so that battle will still rage. But my goodness gracious, everything being turned on its head here late in this race.
Yeah, in the heat of the battle, they forgot to save fuel, and we've seen that happen previously in endurance events as well, but wow, it's a tragedy for those guys. David Burns now in 5th place. Let's see where they drop. Pleiser is 7th, Byfeld is 8th, Podacek is down to 9th, and Randall is in 10th. Wow, that's a heartbreak for those guys. Philip Hammer in turn, being able to hold down to the 2nd position most likely, and Josh Brain. He was the other driver beside Jürgen Frank, who took those long stints, and here you can see the result of it. He's in position number 3. not too shabby for someone we counted out after his fuel-saving shenanigans.
Exactly. We certainly thought that he was going to be out of the race and not the best one to be able to go, but he is in fantastic position. As you see 2 and 3 running by your screen right now. I think Salander, though, is having problems. He is dropping a whole bucket of time back to David Burns.
Yeah, he lost a bit of time at the last sector of the last lap, and Burns has been able to use the draft. He's able to pass him here. Salander just massive lift there. I think he might have to save a little bit of fuel here on the last lap just to make sure he gets it to the line. I wonder, Burns after that extra pit stop doesn't have those issues. He's able to early on and as a result running full throttle here. I hope for the battle in the championship that Salander is able to hold on to the back of him, that he is not actually at the risk of running out of fuel, because that would be very exciting. Mind you, remind the viewers who might have been joining in partway through the race, David Burns and Andre Salander are 2nd and 3rd in the championship. David Burns 1 point ahead of Andre Salander. They are now 4th and 5th on track. So the 2nd in the championship is going to be decided on track here on the last lap as we are watching the leader, Jürgen Frank.
Jürgen Frank making his way down through Mulsanne for the final time. Only a minute left to go on the clock here as time continues to tick away. We are on the white flag lap of the final round of the Absolute Beginners League Formula Neagle Championship here. And it looks like behind them, Salander has been able to catch up a little bit, do a little bit of fuel saving, and do what he needs to do. So this is good news for that championship battle that you talked about for P2 in the points. Salander with a little bit of a half-hearted look there, not going to completely commit to the pass going down into Mulsanne. And as you said earlier, Ozzy, he's really only going to have probably one more shot at this going down into Indianapolis, as from there on out going through the Porsche curves, not going to be helpful.
Actually coming out of Arnage and into Porsche is where he wants to make that move. It's still a long straight, so now he's holding back. He's holding back. I wonder if David Burns realizes this situation. Maybe if I would be David Burns, they have some gap behind them. They have 8 seconds. I would just lift off the throttle. I would just brake blatantly, like move aside and lift off the throttle and essentially force Salander's hand to make that move. Alternatively, what he can do is what Riku Alatalo used to do at Bathurst, which is coming down to the last long straight down the mountain. Just lift out the throttle. Don't go past like 100 km an hour. The draft's not going to have an effect on that speed. So that's another thing they can do. But Salander losing a lot of time. I think he had to lift off too much in order to mount that fight. So David Burns able to get away here. And as such, all our speculation was moot.
It was indeed, but the speculation of the speed of one man here, Jürgen Frank, who we have seen absolutely dominate here today, slinging that car out of the Porsche curves for the final time as he lines up to be able to go down into the Ford chicanes. That 176 putting on a masterclass of fuel saving and race strategy here today. Only a couple of corners to go here for the 176. One more now brings it out of the final corner, and that is going to be victory here at Le Mans for the 176 machine of Jürgen Frank.
It is his first win of the season. Congratulations, he played the game perfectly. Josh Brain, another driver who was able to play the game very well indeed. Philip Hammer almost able to catch back up to him on the last lap, but not quite. Oh, and Philip Hammer is out of fuel on the last lap. What does that mean to our championship winner? Can he coast it to the finish line? I think so, barely. But where is Burns? Burns is 3 seconds away and not catching fast enough. Philip Hammer able to get to the line just ahead of David Burns, who in turn was able to drop Salander back 6 seconds on the last lap. So fuel indeed becoming a factor as David Burns actually puts in the fastest lap for good measure. And we still have some fights here on the track, DJ. Eifeld and Fleischer.
Yes, we do. It looks like Beifeld is going to be able to hold on to Fleischer, as Fleischer is also out of fuel there. Coming up behind is Wojciech Podacek. It looks like he's not going to be able to get that move done as they cross over. Waiting for it. Oh, another driver out of fuel as they cross over the line. That is the 79 of Alexander Wilfert. Oh man, fuel strategy absolutely coming back to bite so many drivers here today. Is he going to be able to creep across the line? Yes, he is, but that is only going to be 11th best. It looks like the 75 of Tony Hayes also out of fuel.
Yeah, so a lot of drivers really managing their fuel economy right to the limit. You're still seeing some of the last drivers finishing up the race, but wow, that certainly is, we are talking about it being the absolute beginner series. And a lot of these drivers probably not having experience with fuel saving in endurance events. Granted, the name can be a misnomer in a sense that a lot of these drivers can't really be classified as absolute beginners, more like, you know, actually good drivers who are just racing in the ABL league. But still, experience becomes a factor. Jürgen Frank and Josh Brain showing that experience the best here today. And DJ, on that note, I think we are going to a break.
We are indeed. We're going to head to a quick break here, but we will be back in just a short moment with unofficial results as well as podium interviews, so do not go anywhere. Welcome back to Le Mans. You just saw a fuel-intense race here at the Circuit de la Sarthe, as it was Jürgen Frank that was able to best all of the other drivers with a little bit of cagey strategy, and Josh Brain following him behind as well. Both of those drivers able to extend their stints by 1 lap to come home on the lead. Philip Hammer was able to come home in third, followed by David Burns, with Andres Salander and Marcus Beifeld rounding out your top 6. It was Remco Pleisier behind them, with Wojciech Podacek, Christopher Guros, and Mark Figueros rounding out your top 10.
Indeed, and in 11th place we have Alexander Wilford being able to just get across the line. Jeff Randall in 12th, Anthony Hayes 13th, also threatened to almost run out of fuel during the course of the race. Then about 14th, Gregory Nutley in 15th, and we have 2 retirements, Vladimir Stejskal and Frederick Neptune. Neptune never really started this race, or did start but retired after 3 laps of racing. And with that, I believe, DJ, you might have a chance to talk to some of our best drivers today.
I do indeed, and first up is Josh Brain, who through some cagey strategy was able to get his way up onto the podium. Josh, way to go.
Yeah, thanks, TJ. I really wasn't sure that strategy was going to work. I knew that it was going to be a 10-lap race probably, and normally you can only do 3 laps on a tank of fuel, so I gambled on being able to do the 4th lap on the first stint, and obviously when the pack was all bunched up, that was the best time to try and get that lap. And then Marcus was behind me the whole first stint, so I thought he'll stay out with me and we can swap and save some fuel together, but he wasn't. He said after the race that he wasn't sure, so he didn't risk it, but I thought I've got nothing to lose. I've finished somewhere in the top 10, or I could come second, so I gambled.
Well, the gamble that certainly paid out for you. I mean, how close were you running down into that first stop? Were you sputtering coming into the pits, or did you manage to save just the right amount?
Must have been very close to spluttering. I think maybe 0.3 of a litre, which I think is when it starts to splutter, and I was just about on that. But I was clutching it into the chicanes and well, basically all the corners on that lap to make it.
Well, you made it work well. And now I have to ask you, running the Braun GP livery, we were having a debate up here in the booth. Why did you not change it to Brain GP? That just seems like a perfect change for you.
Yeah, it would be, but I've never used Photoshop before. I'd try and get someone to do it for me maybe, and then change the W to an I.
We'll have some people talk. We'll figure it out for you, Josh. But congratulations here, my friend. Is there anybody you'd like to thank for this second place?
Just all the guys in the in ABL and the real in the voice chat together, about half of us, I think. So it was a fun race.
Well, fantastic, and congratulations once again on a strategy executed to perfection, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, DJ.
All right, that was Josh Brain, your second place finisher here today. And Ozzy, I believe you've caught up with our fourth place finisher, Mr. David Burns.
I have indeed David Burns here in the broadcast booth. And David, you were running in the leading duo with Jürgen Frank all the way through the race, doing pretty good job. But in the first stint, I think Jürgen pulled a short one on you, so to speak. Pulled one on you by never passing you, never working together instead of saving fuel. Were you ever worried that you're not able to follow his strategy, that he's essentially being able to run away with the victory? Or was your plan all along to go for 3 laps and not worry about the fuel too much?
It's hard to say. I've never really had somebody sit behind me that long in Le Mans. It was a little boring. Yeah, I realized early on when he's done that, and I'm not. I contemplated taking a slowdown, but then I would have lost his draft. Then I contemplated dropping off and going behind. But to be honest, my calculations didn't have us needing that extra pit stop, so I was slightly outcalculated. But it was what it was. And when I saw him come out just behind me at the second pit stop, I knew it was doomed. But it was a nice chase to try and catch Philip at the end there. I thought I could have got him.
Yeah, it was very much an interesting race. Especially as you went for that extra pit stop. Now, you went for the extra stop very early on, so to speak. Like, you pitted after lap number 6 for the second time. Then you came on for a little extra lap of fuel. Did you know at that point that, okay, it's going to be a 10-lap race, I better do it now rather than on the last lap?
I don't really think it mattered where I did it, to be honest. But I realized early on after the second stop, I thought, yeah, with the amount of time and the amount of laps I can do in this tank, there's no way. It was about half a tank. Half a lap's worth of fuel that I was missing. So it didn't really matter. It was just a case of, I thought, well, I'll just dive in the pits. I thought at this point, my only chance, because I knew Philip was fuel saving. I could see he dropped back. He was fuel saving. I thought, has he fuel saved enough? Obviously he had, but I was just 4 seconds behind him at the line. So it was a good chase at the end.
It was fun. How about the second place in the championship? You managed to clinch that in this race, but it came closer than you think. Because Andre Selander, who was in no man's land, like outside of the top 10 in first lap, you were in that leading duo. We thought we were not going to see an on-track fight for it. 10 on the last lap, you managed to catch up to Andre. Did you know that Andre would have to fuel save a lot more than you, or were you actually worried that, okay, he might actually be able to go full throttle until the end and you have to fight for the second?
To be honest, right up until the second stop, I had forgotten about Andre. And it wasn't until we were at the point where I thought Andre's not stopping. I thought, has Andre fuel saved? And I thought, oh, darn. So I realized early on, after the second stop, I thought, oh, cricket, Andre might be ahead of me. So, but I thankfully, I thought, well, I think my pace was quicker than Andre. So I knew I could probably beat him to the line. And I was a good 7-8 seconds up the road. So yeah, he was actually quite thankful because I helped him with some of his fuel saving as I passed him.
Yeah, you did, and as a result of that, he was able to actually get to the line. We saw a lot of drivers running out of fuel on the last lap, and it was a dramatic race, though, in a different fashion than we perhaps imagined. Thank you so much, David Burns, for the interview, and congratulations on a second place in the championship.
Thanks, guys. Cheers for doing a great broadcast all season. Cheers.
Yep, thank you, David Burns. And next up, I believe DJ has actually received a chance to talk to a man who is potentially champagne-soaked.
I have indeed. Jürgen Frank able to stretch out that pit stop by an extra lap, and that was what got you the win. Congratulations, my friend.
Yeah, good evening, and thank you at first.
Well, talk to me about the strategy there to be able to pull that extra stop. Obviously, able to get a good draft behind David certainly helped you. But how much were you really having to watch your fuel meter the entire time?
Yeah, when I did a few laps, the first few laps on the practice session or the quality session, made a strategy, then I pretty quickly saw that it's going to be a free-stop race, and like it's only one lap, which is has to be done in the last stint. So I thought about a way to eliminate the last pit stop, and you needed to save like 0.2 liters per lap, which is quite a lot on this car, what I saw. And yeah, the start, I immediately began to slow down a bit, saving fuel, and I was hoping that Mr. Burns would overtake me, and luckily he did, so I could save it. And yeah, it was actually quite close. When I was in the pit, I had only 0.2 liters fuel tank, so it worked out perfectly.
Well, it certainly worked out perfectly for you. And I know we haven't seen you in the series all that often. Can we expect you to be a mainstay going forward?
Yeah, actually, I was driving today because it's Le Mans, and I think it's a funny idea of me driving Skippy and on this track. And the guys from the Skippy DH Club reminded me that I told them once that I want to race there, so I took that opportunity and gave it a go today.
Well, you gave it a go and you came out on top, which I'd say is a pretty good batting average. But anybody you would like to thank for this victory?
Yeah, I would like to thank my team SimRC and obviously the Skippy DH guys who reminded me to drive this race. And also I would like to thank you for that great stream.
Well, thank you very much, Jürgen, and congratulations once again.
Thanks. Have a nice evening.
Right back at you. And well, folks, that is about going to wrap things up for us here at Le Mans. But before we go, we'd like to thank the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcast listed here on your screen. Additional thanks goes to June Lalonde, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of her great work. Thanks to the team today, Ozzy, Joe, and Dougie. You can find out more about GSRC at globalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media listed on your screen. Also, please check out our merchandise store at gsrc.storenvy.com. We keep a link in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well so you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. We have upcoming races listed here on your screen, so check them out and mark them down on your calendars. The next race here on the channel is going to be in just about an hour's time, and that is the Sunday Drivers as they head to the Charlotte Roval. That'll be at 4:50 p.m. Eastern Time. That is going to wrap things up for us here, but until next time, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.